You're able to, as Attorney General, hold up your hand, your legal hand, and say, no DEQ or no bully or whatever it happens to be, you can't go there. That's what you're able to do as the AG, right?
Exactly.
All right, James Buchal on the program, GOP candidate for Attorney General. He's in town tomorrow afternoon at Jackson County GOP headquarters, 311 East Main. 1 o'clock is when he's going to be here. And let's see, we have, who do I talk to first? Hello, David. How you doing? You're on with James Buchal.
Hello, how are you? Good morning.
Good morning. What's your question there, James?
I had a question. I had a question for the candidate.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to know what his, primary strategy is to get more votes in major metropolitan areas like Portland and Eugene that are heavily Democratic when it seems like he barely won his primary, just barely over 50%. And he's run for the state office 3 times and hasn't won. So I want to know, what's different this time? What's going to put him over the top? And I'll take your answer on the air.
All right, David, good question. What do you say, James?
Well, I think the primary thing that's different this time is that people are getting more and more disgusted with the status quo. And in Oregon, the status quo means Democrats. And I think the Democrats are not terribly enthusiastic about their party. Republicans are recognizing that this is it. This is a Rubicon election. If we lose this, we may lose our freedoms in a very fundamental way. So the Republicans are very motivated. And my primary strategy is to get them much more motivated in the areas outside of Portland. Inside Portland, it's a matter of identifying some sliver in the middle that can be moved. And we have little computer models and mailing lists and things to do that with, and that's what we will focus on.
On your website, James, you talk about various issues that you think are pretty important, and accountability for public funds. What problems do you see happening here in the state of Oregon, and what needs to be solved?
Well, we have a situation of recurring projects where tens or hundreds of millions of dollars are spent, and we have nothing to show for it at all. I mean, you probably remember the one about computerizing DEQ where they spent, $60 million or something, and at the end they had a bunch of brand new computers in a basement that no one could use. And no one ever really figured out what went wrong there. And the newest one is this bridge crossing over the Columbia River. We spent something like $140 million on this thing.
Mm-hmm.
And we get to where we are now. We have a plan that doesn't work because somebody, for some reason, designed the bridge shorter than all the other bridges, so the stuff can't get under it. And when people audit this, they go in there and they discover, $15 million has been spent without any vendor codes, and there's illegal charges here and illegal charges there, and no one's ever held accountable.
Are we just corrupt or incompetent?
Well, it's a mixture of both, but there's definitely some corruption there. And up in the Columbia River Bridge project, they discovered that the contractor's tacking on an extra 4% to his subcontractor charge, and he has no authority to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a statute in Oregon that's been around only since 2009. That's a False Claims Act that says that if someone makes a false statement to the state and collects money thereby, the Attorney General can sue to get it back. And I'd like to do things like go in and say, okay, you claimed that these payments were due to you under the contract. The contract can provide for these secret 4% kickback type things, and so let's get the money back. But we have never seen that statute used yet.
Gee, I wonder why. I mean, is it that we have our favorite friends and contractors in high places? And it reminds me very much of how John Corzine over in the federal situation. Somehow $1.6 billion disappears from MF Global, but we can't really prosecute it. Yeah, nobody knows anything about what happened. The money just disappeared. There must have been chaos. Right,
yeah,
James?
Yeah, and yet the emails are in the newspaper saying, JC said to do it. And we know who the woman is who was involved, but she's got Eric Holder's best friend for her lawyer, and everything is all wired up, and people are really, really sick of that.
Do we have some of that here in Oregon right now? Kind of that mentality of
I
an
think
Eric
we
Holder?
do. I think we do. I think we have a series of scandals involving people who are politically powerful that are sort of investigated, and somehow it just never goes anywhere.
All right, James Buchal is on the program. He's running for Oregon Attorney General. Paul has a question here. Good to have you here. Good morning, Paul.
Good morning, everyone. There's a jurisdictional and other conflicts between the sheriffs in the state of Oregon and the Forest Service law enforcement and BLM law enforcement. And specifically what some of them are, I don't know what all of them are, but apparently that when there are certain investigations, the sheriff's excluded from it and so on and so forth, and they're requiring a freedom of information filing by the sheriff to get the information. As Attorney General and working with the federal people, this really needs to be resolved because it's getting nasty and people are making complaints to the sheriff. And I don't know if you are aware of it, but Sheriff Gilbertson here is really up to speed on it. And I'm just wondering now, listen on the air, if you're aware of any of this and what you could do as Attorney General. And by the way, you sound really good. I worked for DA's offices before. I'm retired law enforcement. And it sounds to me like we could use somebody like you for Attorney General. But if you could address that problem, please, and I'll listen on the air.
Thank you, Paul. James?
Well, thank you. My understanding is that there's some sort of bizarre concurrent jurisdiction that's evolved in this context, but that states retain traditional, police powers with respect to things that go on Forest Service land. My role as Attorney General would be to fight against federal power at every opportunity. And I'm limited to go with the law that I have that's in place now, but I would urge the legislature and the counties out there to begin expanding their powers over federal land in ways that were consistent with traditional police powers under the state. And so, for example, states have always been recognized to be able to protect the public health and safety of their people. I would love to see the state and the counties passing ordinances that say if you let giant piles of dead wood build up all over the place so they're a fire hazard, we're going to go in and cut that stuff ourselves if you don't, because it's making our people sick with the smoke, it's burning down their houses, it's a threat to public health and safety, and then get some of these good constitutional sheriffs in there with the contractors and have some kind of standoff with the federal government and push this thing all the way to the Supreme Court, because the federal government is the biggest enemy rural Oregon has now. And it's a situation that has festered for a long time, and Oregon has just sat there and taken it and hasn't pushed back. There's an old saying, I think Frederick Douglass says it, which is power concedes nothing without a struggle. It never has, it never will. And we have to struggle against the federal government to recover our powers to get control of Oregon's destiny back in the hands of the people of Oregon.
James, one of the issues that has kind of been a hot button for me, not that I'm a fan of the medicinal marijuana law, I think it's flawed and of questionable benefit at times, but still we can actually pass laws that aren't necessarily good. What does concern me is when we have the state will not defend it against federal incursion because it doesn't work with federal laws on drugs and this and that and the other. And it seems really strange that we have our own organs helping the federal government to fight a law which we ourselves have passed. Don't you think that's rather unusual?
Yeah, and that's because the liberals have this grossly erroneous view of the Constitution that the federal government can do everything it likes, and the states are just some sort of wimps that are really sort of unnecessary appendages. We could just abolish them and have the federal government do everything. I have a traditional view of the Constitution, which is that the commerce power refers to goods moving across borders, and the things that happen within the borders of a state and don't involve goods crossing borders are none of the federal government's business at all. And so I would be very vigilant in defending the powers of the state and defending the legislation adopted by the people of Oregon or by the legislature, even if I think in some cases that it's poorly written.
Mm-hmm. And that happens, like I mentioned, but you're allowed to be wrong. Let's talk with David. David, you're on with James Buchal. Go ahead.
Good morning. Nice to hear you on the radio. I have donated to your cause. You bring up lots of issues with me. One of the ones that comes up is voter fraud and maintaining that we have allow our soldiers to vote and that we have good, honest elections. But the question I have for you, you mentioned going after the people that are in government that are creating fraud and not getting the state and people's money back. I recently heard about all the I don't know, it was welfare or unemployment fraud that was going on, and there's like $20 million worth or more out there that people are not refunding back or returning. And I wonder if you're going to go after any of those people. Thank you.
All right, appreciate the call, David.
The answer, I think, goes back to that false claim statute I was talking about. If I were Attorney General, I would ask people in every county to have a sort of a hotline and to forward along places where people are getting money illegally, and we would make it a very high priority to get that money back.
All right, very good. James, you'll be in town tomorrow afternoon, 1 o'clock at Republican Party headquarters downtown. And, of course, raising money, giving a speech, and all the rest of it. How can people find out more about your candidacy online?
www.buchal.com.